At the Global Liver Institute, we believe it all starts with a patient. So what happens when a patient, a liver patient no less, one of the 500 million people living with conditions that often go undiagnosed, untreated, or misdiagnosed, mistreated, and stigmatized, brings the challenges of liver patients front and center? And what happens when a patient then leads a discussion with world experts in policy, research, clinical care, and wellness on ways to overcome these challenges? Let's find out today on GLI Live. Hello and welcome everyone to this very special episode of GLI Live. I'm Donna Cryer, CEO of the Global Liver Institute and your host. Today's episode is entitled Running on Hope with marathoner and liver transplant recipient Phil Shin. And I am so excited to welcome Shin as we have been focusing. Even like so many reasons why he's like perfect for our show today, and why I'm so excited to be talking with him as a fellow liver transplant recipient of Long Standard. But he's the embodiment of National Physical Fitness and Sports Month, something we transplant recipients do not have to cede any room to, but it's also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage and Health Month. And I want to make sure that we focus on that in the same way that we do other communities and populations, because all liver patients are important to us. So Phil, welcome.
Good morning, Donna. Thanks so much for having me here this morning. And wow, I definitely feel like I ticked a lot of boxes there. So I'm pretty stoked to be here and chat with you. I more so just because I anytime I have an opportunity to chat with somebody who had the same lived experience that I have as a transplant recipient, I can speak for days with that person, because even though we've reached the same destination, our journeys are probably far different, right? And that's what makes, all transplant recipients stories so amazingly special. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely. Well, people are very interested in your story, and you have so many facets to it. So I want to get to it. So how did you come to transplantation? I know it came through liver cancer and a lot of other stops along the way. So tell us how you got here.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me the space here to talk about it. It's an interesting journey myself, because I've been a marathoner for, gosh, I would say probably since the early to mid 2000s. So for a good 10 years, I've been running marathons pretty consistently. And in 2018, I had actually, just run the LA Marathon, and that by then it was like my 10th marathon, I believe. So at that time, I had the LA Marathon. It's in March, and earlier that year, I went in for my annual blood check, and I actually had a new physician who didn't know anything about my history, but I did let him know that I had a history of hepatitis B, which is passed down through my mother. And I'd known about this since I was like a young boy. But, as a runner, I felt like, I never was symptomatic. I never had any of the obvious signs that are associated with hepatitis. So my previous doctor had even said, look, as long as you keep running and continue to do the right things, the virus really shouldn't activate. So because I switched to the new doctor, I passed that information. Hey, I don't think we need to do anything, because, I'm running, and I'm about ready to run the LA Marathon. But he didn't know me. So he says, look, let's just go ahead and do the full blood panel. So I went in, had the blood drawn. I ran that LA Marathon. And then after the marathon, he called me back into the hospital asking me to have a conversation. I was, all right, well, what's going on? And he goes, well, your blood results came in, and one of the one of the blood panels came back extraordinarily high. So this was the AFP tumor marker panel, and that's the fetal protein level. So he said that for a normal scale for someone without any issues, the scale for this is really like 0 to 8. Mine was over 5,000. So that that drew loads of concern. And me, I felt fine. I just ran the LA Marathon. There were no
Mm-hmm.
issues that I was experiencing. So I said, well, this has got to be a mistake. And he says, yeah, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a really big cyst. It could be just the crazy false positive. So why don't we just go ahead and get you in for an ultrasound just to see if there's anything in
Mm-hmm.
your liver. So I went in for the ultrasound, and sure enough, there was confirmation of some kind of mass. It was about the size of a racquetball, but we
Wow.
still didn't really know what it was. So they then sent me over to an imaging center to get an MRI done. So I
Mm-hmm.
went, all right. So got a closer look. Results came back. Okay, this looks like cancer, but we don't know what we're dealing with here. So we want to take an even closer look.
Mm-hmm.
So they sent me in for a CT scan. And you being a transplant, recipient yourself, you know
Mm-hmm.
that a CT scan is not comfortable at all. This is where you get the full-fledged radiation. They
Mm-hmm.
inject you with contrast. So that was super uncomfortable. By then, my family and I realized that, okay, we're probably dealing with an actual problem here. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to deal with this. So we had to put everything on stop. And sure enough, the results of that CT scan definitely came back with a very, very positive cancer diagnosis. So, and that's when they put me in front of a liver surgeon and
Mm-hmm.
told me right then and there that, hey, we need to get you in for surgery as soon as possible to resect this tumor from your liver, which would result in them taking out a third of my liver. And again, this is all within a month of me running my 10th marathon, never feeling
Mm-hmm.
symptomatic. So the word cancer was never on our radar. It wasn't within our stratosphere. So to be given a cancer diagnosis, and not only given a cancer diagnosis, but to be taken in for major abdominal surgery all within 6 weeks, just yeah, we were beyond confused the entire time. Even though they just kept telling us that, okay, you have cancer and we got to get this tumor removed out of you. So yeah, so it was actually not until I came out of that surgery, and it was a successful surgery
Mm-hmm.
where again they removed a third of my liver, when we realized, wow, we have cancer. I mean, that it took that event, that surgery, for me to realize that I had cancer. So yeah, so
Well,
that's how it came.
you point to so many things that aren't often told. One that you know, young people can get liver disease, can get liver cancer. That hepatitis B can be passed from mother to child, and often is in Asian American populations. And so, screening for hepatitis B, screening for liver cancer, really should be part of everyday management. Um, you're also perfect example that liver disease often does not have these overt symptoms. It's not about, oh, well, I turned yellow. And so that's how we knew I had liver disease. You were running marathons and still had this very active liver disease, liver cancer growing. And so, as we talk in our liver cancer council, and there's so much about, our work at GLI with liver health being public health, pulling the lens back and being able to embrace a larger segment of people in liver health education, in liver cancer screening, is so important, so that they have the opportunity, they're caught early enough so they have the opportunities that you did to be resected before it's too late, or to have some of the treatments that are being developed but are often, people are just diagnosed too late. So you point out so many important parts of what we need people to understand about liver disease and liver health.
Yeah, and we never really kind of like escaped that state of confusion, because like you'd
Mm-hmm.
mentioned about those obvious signs, right? Those
Right.
being symptomatic, right? I remember when my wife and I went to the liver clinic, right,
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, and we were just sitting in that waiting room, and we just scanned the room, and I was frightened. I was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely frightened to my core, because I walked in basically my running clothes, right? And I'm in this waiting room, and you just see these just incredibly sad liver disease cases.
Hmm.
We had people in wheelchairs, and
Right.
I just still have this really vivid memory of this poor
Hmm.
woman who I hope is still with us today. But she was in a wheelchair. She was on oxygen.
Hmm.
Her face was yellow, and
Hmm.
she had these two large gallon-sized Ziploc bags filled with meds.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think, is this going to be me too?
Right.
Right. So, because I had no idea. Right.
Hmm.
So, but like you said, just because it wasn't even me. I mean, it was because my doctor had the
Hmm.
foresight to say, "Hey, look, let's just go ahead and run these tests just to make
Right.
sure," because he probably understood that, hey, you don't need to be symptomatic to have
Hmm.
an issue, a major issue with your liver. So loads of gratitude to my family and my medical team for being such amazing advocates for me and making sure that we can prevent this liver cancer from
Hmm.
manifesting into something further than um, something more serious that even a liver transplant wouldn't be able to resolve.
And that's the next stage of your story, and you have more families and friends starring in that stage of your story. So, do we want to talk about the role of your great friend Mark?
Yeah, well, maybe we can back up just a
Okay.
little bit. So yeah, so after I had that resection, I was able to
Hmm.
get running again pretty quickly. By then, my liver transplant team or my liver surgery team, they didn't really have any runners as patients. So, and as you know, like when you go through liver disease and you have a
Hmm.
resection or just a variety of different surgeries, they're just trying to motivate you to get out of bed, right?
Right.
To go for a walk, or just
Hmm.
to just to self-manage yourself, right?
Right.
Me, on the other hand, as a runner, I was fully prepared to start running again, right? But they were not encouraging me to run because
Hmm.
they just didn't have this kind of case
Right.
before, right? So I essentially kind of had to lone wolf it and figure it
Hmm.
out on my own. So after that first surgery, ended up running a marathon just 5 months post surgery, and I qualified for the Boston Marathon in that marathon, which was the first time I'd ever qualified for Boston. So that was a
Right.
major event, and
Hmm.
I got zero guidance from my medical team. I didn't know if I was able to do it, right? So in fact, I actually kind of kept it quiet because I didn't want
Right.
them discouraging me from doing it, right?
No,
So
I know. I feel the same way. I would often tell my team, some of the forays. I mean, I'm not a runner like you. I run meetings in pantyhose, basically. But I'd always been a dancer and very
oh,
active, and so I'd usually sort of try some things, and then I'd come and say, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" And they're like, "Well, we don't know." I'm like, "Because I just," and they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess it worked out, so it's good." But I think giving them a larger range of patient experience, to know about and to deal with, so that they can counsel the next patient better and realize, okay, well, with some support, some patients can do this, or maybe, with changes in, diet, or maybe we'll increase this or change the timing of these procedures. It can
yeah.
allow a patient to explore, that part of their life, and reclaim our sort of personhood in the midst of all this patientness.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and yeah, they still tell me that I'm an outlier, that they can't really use me as like the golden example of how you can you know like, hey, get a get your liver resected and you'll run faster. I don't think that's really the messaging, but I think the idea is, okay, look, if this guy can do it, then
Hmm.
certainly you should be able to get out of bed and go for a walk down
Right.
down the block, right? Um, so what's interesting is that after I ran that marathon, now I was in because I had liver cancer, right? So
Hmm.
my hepatitis manifested into liver cancer.
Right.
So I was on the cancer protocol where I'd have to go
Hmm.
in for monthly scans. So before that marathon, I actually did go in for another scan and another set of blood draws, right?
Hmm.
And then after I ran that race, I came back with my medal to finally, disclosed to my medical team, hey guys, while I was away, I went out and ran a marathon, and oh, by the
Mhm.
way, I qualified for Boston. And my liver doctor, he was very, very,
Mhm.
excited, very pleased. But then I saw the look in his eye when he said, okay, well, Phil, that's great, but I need you to sit down, we need to have a conversation. And that's when
Mhm.
he shared with me that my most recent lab result and the scans indicated that there was a recurrence of my cancer. So that's when he sat me down, and now I had not only my liver surgeon, but I also had a transplant surgeon sitting in front of
Mhm.
me saying that I needed a liver transplant. And just like the first time, right? I just
Mhm.
finished running, that LA marathon. Now I'd actually just run this marathon, and now
Mhm.
I qualified for Boston. Now they're telling me you need a liver transplant.
Mhm.
So that state of confusion just
Right.
completely, circled back, and we were just completely blown away that we needed a transplant. Because if anything, I just thought, okay, well, do we just have another resection where we can
Mhm.
just remove the
Right.
tumor? They said that that was off the table, and my transplant surgeon, she said in the scariest words, but I needed to hear it this way. She said that my liver had become a tumor factory, and the only way to fix this is to remove that factor and replace it with a new liver. So that is when we were first introduced to the transplant protocol.
Mhm.
I got listed right away. But what was really challenging with this new world that we were living in was that
Mhm.
I was too healthy to move high on the
Right.
list for a transplant.
Mhm.
So based on my fitness, even though I had cancer in that
Right.
liver, right, the tumor was too small for me to get the exception points to move up
Mhm.
higher on the list. So, there's the MELD score, right?
Right.
And the MELD score that would probably give you a good shot at getting a transplant, here in Southern California where I live would be about like a low to mid 30s, which is basically at the top of the scale,
Right.
right?
And
I can,
that's often how it is, across the country. You need 30s
mhm,
or 40s even, and so that puts at a disadvantage otherwise healthy people or some with like autoimmune conditions. Um, and that's why we've been focused on organ procurement organization reform to make sure that opportunities are available throughout the country. For people, there's a possibility of eliminating the waiting list for liver transplant recipients, so you don't have to be at death's door like I was with 7 days to live to get a transplant. That you can
right,
get a transplant earlier when you have an even better shot of living a healthy life with it.
right,
So
right, right. And unfortunately, we're not there yet, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
for me, when I got the letter saying that I'd been listed, right, comes with your score. My score
right.
was a 6. And when I tried to explain to people what that means, I said, well, like that SAT test that you take, how you get points just for writing your name? Yeah, that's what I
Hmm.
got. So just for writing my name, getting listed, you get that,
Hmm.
right? So that was a blow, because
Right.
then that was them just telling us. In fact, my transplant hepatologist told me, "Look, your chances of getting a liver from a deceased donor, it's probably going to be about 3 years, just because of the health of your liver and your physical health. You're
Mhm.
clearly not in ICU. You're not,
Right.
yeah, you're so far away from that."
Right.
But what made mine particularly complicated is because it was cancer, right,
Hmm.
in the liver, which is a vascular
Hmm.
organ, right? The risk of it spreading elsewhere in my body
Right.
was quite high, right? And then if that happens, right,
Right.
if let's just say the cancer spreads to my stomach or my
Hmm.
lungs, then that would automatically remove me from being listed for a transplant, because now
Right.
a liver transplant will no longer help me, right?
Right.
So that's when we made the decision that we need to pursue another option, right?
Hmm.
And that's when they first shared with us the option of the living liver donation. So this was deemed as our most realistic option for receiving a liver
Hmm.
transplant soon. So with this audience and yourself, you're obviously very familiar with the living donor transplant process.
Right.
I think it's a critical
Hmm.
area of need in terms of just creating awareness and education. Because at the time, right, I had
Mhm.
no idea that, you
Right.
can donate a portion of your
Mhm.
liver, right? Because, people, they've heard about blood donation, kidney
Right.
donation, bone marrow
Right.
donation, but I only have one liver, right? I'd be
Right.
happy to donate it, but I kind of need it for myself. So, right. So
Right.
my eventual liver donor, Mark, even he didn't know, right? It took
Mhm.
an email, a detailed email from our family when we
Mhm.
reached out to our friends and family and colleagues in that email that we actually had to like educate them that you
Right.
can actually donate a portion of your healthy liver to replace
Mhm.
someone's
Right.
cancerous liver. So Mark had no idea that you could donate a portion of your liver. So they went ahead and they filled out the online questionnaire, named me as the intended recipient,
Mhm.
and it that's how the path begins, right?
Right.
So that
Can I just
education was
ask
massive.
ask Phil,
Yeah.
like, so some patients, when faced with that knowledge that a living donor is really the best option for them, um they don't want to ask, or they don't want to endanger the health of their family or their friends or their network, or they don't know how to connect to the resources that there are to help with living donation communication and awareness. How did you wrap your mind around, you know making the ask?
Yeah, I actually couldn't do it. I just didn't have it in me to
Hmm.
ask someone to do something as life-changing as
Hmm.
this, because there's a lot of risks that are anchored to this decision, right? Obviously, it's a major surgery, right? So
Hmm.
you're jeopardizing your own health, even though, you will be well taken care of. They will not
Right.
actually just grab you off the street and say, do this, right? They'll
Well,
take you through an
it's very
exhaustive screening
rare
process.
for any actual harm to come to a living liver, donor. Um,
Right.
it is rare. I'm not saying
But
it
yeah,
ever
but we
happen, but
wanted to
it's
make sure
rare. But
we're
yeah,
yeah, but we wanted to be upfront and say, look,
right.
you are subjecting yourself to major surgery.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably gonna be fine, but still there are risks.
Right.
And the surgery team will talk you through those
Mm-hmm.
risks. There are financial risks because obviously you're gonna have to take some time off from work, right?
Right.
There's possible even like insurance risks because
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing a voluntary medical procedure like
Mm-hmm.
this, that can actually create some conflicts with your own life insurance
Right.
plan. So things like that we had to
Mm-hmm.
spell out, right? So
And
we
those are
were
the
at
types of things that we're trying to address in the Living Donor Protection Act,
right.
and legislation at the state and federal level to make sure that, people, that their costs of taking off time from work,
Hmm.
or life insurance and other health insurance and things like that aren't already covered by the recipient health insurance, that any deficit that they experience from donation, is covered, so that, beyond this amazing gift that they're already doing, that they're not penalized for it in any way.
Exactly. But we wanted to be as upfront. We didn't want
Hmm.
them to be surprised like
Right.
during the evaluation process. So we did the best we could. And again,
Hmm.
I have trouble just asking people to pay me money back when I
I
lend
know.
them money, right? So I actually outsourced this task to my wife and to my brother and sister, right?
Hmm.
I just gave them all the facts. I gave them the link to
Hmm.
the transplant clinic. I had my transplant done at Keck Medical Center of
Hmm.
USC here in Los Angeles, and
Hmm.
um, so here are the facts. I will feed you all the content that you need. You guys just frame it, and then here's my contact list. Push it out, right? So that's what they did, and
Hmm.
we were just stunned to find out after my transplant that there were 16 people who actually submitted themselves and went submitted that questionnaire, right?
Hmm.
So my longtime friend Mark of over 20 years, he's based in Portland, Oregon,
Hmm.
and he was a perfect match for me, just based on his responses on the
Hmm.
questionnaire, and he ended up becoming an exact same blood type as me, and
Mm-hmm.
we're roughly the same height. We're the same age. Our birthdays are only like a week apart. So he and I are basically clones of each other. Uh,
That was
so
good. You friends with foresight there.
yeah, yeah. So he was like the perfect match. But then again, just bless him. I mean, he flew down from Portland to the
Mm-hmm.
transplant clinic over at CAC to go through the exhaustive medical screening process. So he did at least 3 trips down here without my knowledge,
Wow.
to
Yeah.
get confirmed as my match. So, and he eventually did 6 months after he had hit submit on that
Mm-hmm.
questionnaire. So yeah, so that's how he got matched, and I found out through him directly in a 3-way text between Mark, myself, and our mutual best friend Eric. So we we're just texting about nonsense because we're basically idiots, right? So we're and it was a great escape for me, because I was obviously going through all the mental and
Mm-hmm.
emotional challenges of waiting, right? So I use that 3-way text as like my own personal escape to kind of like feel
Mm-hmm.
normal, right? And we talk about music, we talk about sports, we talk
Mm-hmm.
about just all the nonsense things, right? So, and then he revealed himself on that text thread that he was my
Mm-hmm.
donor, and just completely redefined our friendship in terms of what he means to me as a friend. So yeah.
So he has a standing invitation to Thanksgiving, or and Christmas and all the holidays
Yeah,
that he had
yeah, yeah,
now
yeah,
made
yeah.
possible if he didn't already.
No, no, yeah, he's definitely now. You know how they say your brother from another mother,
Mhm.
right? Now he's my brother of the same liver now, right? So yeah, so but no, Mark and I, we're now on this completely new journey together, and we've done some pretty amazing things together in support of the liver community and to help advocate for organ donation. Mark and I, we did something pretty rad last month where we ran the Boston Marathon together as liver transplant recipient and liver
Mhm.
donor, and we ran for the American Liver Foundation. We
Mhm.
raised a lot of money for them. We ran for
Mhm.
the team, and yeah, that was kind of like the slam dunk, for this entire experience. It's certainly not, our finish line, but it's
Mhm.
certainly a moment where we said, "Hey, look what we just did
Mhm.
together," right? Not only as, dear friends, but as real real advocates
Mhm.
for the liver community. I think Mark has truly exemplified himself as like the golden boy for for living liver
Mhm.
donation, because the Boston Marathon was his very first marathon, and it
Wow.
was actually running that kind of like galvanized
Mhm.
our path to transplant, because Mark, he was a healthy guy, but, as
Mhm.
part of the evaluation process, his transplant team encouraged him to just kind of get in better shape so that he can
Right.
get through the surgery, without any issues.
Mhm.
So pretty cool story. The only thing that made sense to him to do was, hey, I'll just go running, right? I
Right.
live in one of the most beautiful parts of the country
Mhm.
in Oregon, and in
Right.
Oregon, it is, it's the home
Mhm.
of Nike, it's the home of
Right.
Adidas. So I mean, you can't help but like step outside and
Mhm.
just see runners everywhere. So Mark took up running, but he didn't really know any runners because he wasn't a runner. So
Right.
he reached out to me without disclosing himself as my donor,
Mhm.
right? Or without
Right.
disclosing him as my potential donor, right? Um, Asking me for advice on running, right? So, and I thought, and like I said, we're idiots on this text. I said, "What are you doing running? You don't run, man." So he goes, "No,
But
no,
he
no,
had
I'm
a
just."
new reason. He had a new
He had a new
cause.
reason, yeah. But how cool is that, right? So he is taking up running, right? And
Mhm.
to he's taking up running to improve his health to become my liver liver donor, and he is reaching out to said liver
Mhm.
recipient or the person in need, for advice on running. So it's just, I mean, you can't make this up in terms of like how we've come where we've come. So
I,
now Mark
I,
is like, yeah, I'm
I
sorry,
was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, I think it's wonderful too that the relationship stays mutual. That it isn't just, you as the recipient, you had something to offer him that you were still teaching him. And so your friendship is, still
Yeah.
equal. It's still, give and get it. And so
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
really fantastic.
Right. And
So
it's kind of cool. I'm
yeah.
sorry. It just,
No,
yeah,
no, go.
there's one really funny thing. Like, it's like, as it relates to the Boston Marathon, is that, so, Mark, he took up running, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
knew that, to run Boston, you have to qualify. You have to run fast enough to meet the qualifying
Mm-hmm.
standard, right? So, Mark, he had said, that, well, what's cool about this transplant is that, I'll never be fast enough to run the Boston Marathon, but,
Mm-hmm.
hey, a part of me is going to get to run the Boston Marathon. I'll never have that
Mm-hmm.
chance, but kind of, I am going to be running
Mm-hmm.
it. And then that's when it kind of planted a seed in me. Well, let's see if we can get you to run the Boston Marathon. And that's when I brought him onto the American
Mm-hmm.
Liver Foundation
Mm-hmm.
team that has, they have a team that runs the Boston
Mm-hmm.
Marathon. In fact, you probably know that the American Liver Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
they were the very first charity for the BAA program. In fact, they are the ones who launched the BAA charity program. So, for Mark to, run his very first marathon at the Boston Marathon for the American Liver Foundation
Mm-hmm.
was just something that you can't make this up, right?
Yeah,
So,
I know.
so we did that. Yeah, so we did that together, and he was fully celebrated, by the team and
Mm-hmm.
by, the running community, that entire Boston weekend. So to see everything kind of like come full circle and be celebrated, it was almost like a big parade that entire day, because there's just so many people,
Mm-hmm.
for what's honestly the most prestigious marathon in the world. It was just a perfect ending to this phase of, our friendship.
I love that um, your story is a story, and Mark's story are stories of joy and celebration. I think we don't have enough of that in liver cancer,
Yeah.
certainly. And I think that there is hope, there is inspiration, there is possibility. There are new, therapies and surgeries and interventions and new policies that should give people hope. And I think your story absolutely does. And we'll make sure that people have information about living, how they could possibly become living donors in the show notes. And as we as we distribute this, I'm just so grateful to be able to hear your story directly and to be able to share it with the world. So thank you so much, Phil, for being with us today.
Hey, thanks so much, Donna. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing more stories that you can elevate through your platform. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Join us weekly on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time for more episodes of GLI Live. Check out our website, globalliver.org, and follow us on social media to learn more about the Global Liver Institute and stay up to date with the latest in liver health. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.